Me and Tony have to figure out how we can both play in the sandbox without getting in each other's way.
Ready for your first night shift?
Oh, looking forward to it, you know?
20, 30, 160, 61, 62, 160.
Kevin Beets just pulled off something that left Tony and Parker speechless. He made a jaw-dropping $300,000 in gold while they struggled to keep up. His risky plan to run the wash plant nonstop seemed impossible, but he refused to back down. But how did he turn this gamble into one of the biggest paydays ever? Tune in, because what happened next made all the miners think about retiring for good. The night shift disaster no one expected. To hit their ambitious target, Kevin brought in a fresh crew, including Kaden Foot, a young miner with a family history in the game. He had only been on the team for 2 weeks, but now he was thrown straight into night shift, expected to keep the operation running in the dark, alone. No backup, no second opinions, just him, the plant, and whatever creatures lurked in the night. If something went wrong, he'd have to fix it, because no one was coming to help until morning. And as expected, something did go wrong. Before we dive into this, it's clear that the night took a terrifying turn, and what happened next wasn't just a setback, it was a disaster no one saw coming. The conveyor belt snapped under the weight of piled up pay dirt. Just like that, the entire night's work was at risk, with thousands of dollars on the line. Kaden had no choice but to shut down the plant, losing valuable hours. The day shift arrived to find a disaster waiting for them. Tons of dirt clogging the hopper and a belt in need of urgent repair. This wasn't just a setback, it was a nightmare. Digging out 12 tons of dirt by hand was no joke, and the crew wasn't happy about it. The crew leader did not waste any time. While others might have argued about what went wrong or blamed each other, he stayed focused on what needed to be done. The conveyor belt had broken and everything had come to a stop. It was a serious problem, but instead of letting frustration slow him down, he grabbed the tools and got straight to work. He had seen problems like this before and knew that standing around talking about it would not fix anything. His team was depending on him, and the longer they waited, the worse it would get. Every minute wasted meant losing more gold, and in this business, time was money. The fix was not easy. The damage was worse than they first thought, and some of the parts were completely worn out. A quick patch would not last, and replacing the whole system would take too long. He had to find a way to get things running again without making the problem worse. With mining experience and some smart thinking, he found a way to make it work. He and his team patched up the broken section, reinforced the weak spots, and made sure the belt would hold up under pressure. It was not a perfect fix, but it was enough to get them through the night. The moment they switched the machine back on and saw the belt moving again, they knew they were back in business. But even though they had fixed it, they had lost hours of work. In mining, every lost hour means less gold in the pan. He knew they could not afford to fall behind. The only way to make up for lost time was to push even harder. That meant longer shifts, less rest, and no room for mistakes. His team was already exhausted, but they had no choice. If they wanted to stay ahead, they had to dig deeper, work faster, and make every second count. The pressure was intense, but he believed in his plan. He was not about to let one breakdown ruin everything they had worked for. And then the results started to show. In just 1 week, his team had pulled in an incredible amount of gold, $36,000 worth. That was more than 4 times what they had collected the week before. It was proof that their hard work was paying off. No one had expected them to make such a huge jump in production, but he had. He had trusted his strategy, and now the numbers spoke for themselves. The risks, the exhaustion, the endless hours, they had all been worth it. He had not just kept up, he had surged ahead. Parker and Tony had been watching closely, expecting the plan to fail. But instead of struggling, his operation was soaring past them. Everything was running smoother, faster, and more efficiently than anyone had expected. He was no longer just another miner trying to stay in the game, he was leading it. His success was impossible to ignore, and it made Parker and Tony realize something. He had found a way to push his operation to a level they had not reached. He had taken a risk, and it had paid off in a big way. The crew had just fixed one big problem, but there was no time to rest. From a family mine to a gold empire. Parker Schnabel wasn't just some kid growing up in Alaska, he was practically raised in a mine. Born in late July of 1994, he had gold dust in his veins before he even knew how to walk. His grandfather, John Schnabel, ran the Big Nugget mine, and if you think he had any choice in the matter, think again. This wasn't a kid playing in sandboxes. His playground was heavy machinery, deep pits, and the constant noise of metal scraping against rock. The wilderness wasn't just his backyard, it was his classroom, his proving ground, and the place where he learned the difference between those who make it and those who don't. Forget about video games or lazy weekends. He was learning to handle massive mining equipment while most kids were still figuring out bicycles. By the time high school rolled around, he was already knee-deep in the family business, juggling sports with mining like some kind of double life. Sure, he played varsity basketball, but let's be real. Gold mining was his real game. While others were chasing dreams of college or cushy office jobs, he had dirt under his fingernails and a vision in his head. When graduation hit, he didn't waste a second. College? No thanks. He took every penny meant for higher education and poured it straight into mining. It was a move that could have gone horribly wrong, but he was never the type to second-guess himself. At 16, while most teenagers were worrying about prom, he took over Big Nugget Mine. Not as a helper, not as an assistant, as the boss. His grandfather stepped back, handing over the reins to a kid who had already spent years watching, learning, and most importantly, doing. Managing a crew of experienced, seasoned miners? That's not something most teenagers are built for, but he had been preparing for this moment long before he even realized it. The pressure, insane. The stakes, even higher. But he didn't hesitate. He pushed forward, determined to prove that he wasn't just a kid playing in the dirt. His approach wasn't old school. He didn't just follow the same tired mining methods that had been around for decades. He was all about finding new ways to work faster, dig smarter, and pull more gold out of the ground. He experimented, took risks, and most importantly, learned from every mistake. That's why, when Discovery Channel's Gold Rush came knocking in 2010, he wasn't just some side character, he was a rising star. Viewers were drawn to his relentless drive, his no-nonsense attitude, and the fact that he was outworking guys twice his age. And let's not forget the gold. That first season, he mined over 1,000 ounces, proving to everyone, including himself, that he had made the right call skipping college. With each season of Gold Rush, he didn't just stick to what worked, he scaled up, pushed harder, and went bigger. His mining operations expanded, his gold hauls grew, and suddenly he wasn't just another prospector, he was a serious force in the industry. Efficiency became his obsession. Innovation was his weapon. While other miners played it safe, he bet on himself and kept winning. It wasn't luck. It wasn't handed to him. It was long hours, tough calls, and the willingness to grind when others would have quit. But let's not paint this as some fairy tale. Mining is brutal. Equipment breaks, workers quit. The gold isn't always where you think it is. And yet he thrived under pressure. He adapted, problem solved, and kept moving forward. Even with cameras constantly in his face, documenting every misstep and every ounce of gold, he stayed focused. Fame didn't slow him down. If anything, it added fuel to the fire. The money rolled in, but he wasn't in it for flashy cars or fancy vacations. He reinvested almost everything back into mining. Better equipment, bigger operations, more ambitious digs. The result? Some of the highest gold totals in Gold Rush history. But with success came expectations. Fans wanted bigger wins. Investors wanted bigger returns. The mining industry is ruthless. If you don't keep up, you get left behind. He didn't just build a business, he built a reputation. People respected him not because of TV, but because he delivered results. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, work alongside his crew, and take the same risks he asked of them. Leadership wasn't about barking orders, it was about proving day in and day out that he was willing to outwork everyone else. And while the show made him famous, he never lost sight of the bigger picture. He wasn't just mining gold, he was shaping the future of the industry. He embraced technology, sustainable mining practices, and efficiency in ways that many traditional miners ignored. He knew the land wasn't infinite, and that taking care of it mattered. Mining doesn't have to mean destruction, and he aimed to find the balance between profit and preservation. But let's talk about the real reason his story stands out. It's not just about gold, it's about risk. He gambled everything, his time, his money, his energy, on a business that eats people alive. He bet on himself when others would have played it safe. And against all odds, he made it work. Not because he had a name, not because he got lucky, but because he refused to quit. Even now, with all the success under his belt, Parker isn't coasting. He's still expanding, still pushing boundaries, still proving that hard work beats everything else. His story isn't finished. It's still being written. And if his track record tells us anything, it's that he's far from done. While Parker was proving himself, another miner faced a tough choice: stay in his father's shadow or step out and take a risk on his own. The family feud that shook Gold Rush. Tony Beets built his gold mining empire with grit, sweat, and a whole lot of stubbornness. His son, Kevin, he grew up surrounded by the roar of heavy machinery and the constant pressure to measure up. But as he got older, Kevin started seeing things differently. He had his own ideas about mining, and let's just say they didn't exactly line up with Tony's old-school ways. That's when things got messy. By the time he was a teenager, he was already working full-time under his father. By his late teens, he was running crews, proving that he wasn't just Tony's son, he had real skill. But being good at something doesn't mean you always agree with how it's done. He wanted to modernize the operation, bring in new methods, and make changes. Tony? He wasn't having any of it. The tension kept building until something had to give. Season 14 of Gold Rush was when he finally made his move. He walked away from the family business, leaving Tony scrambling to fill the gap. Fans were stunned. Some thought it was a bold move to step out of his father's shadow. Others saw it as reckless, leaving behind an operation that had been built over decades. Either way, he wasn't looking back, at least not yet. Breaking away wasn't easy. He had to prove that he could handle mining on his own. No Beets name to back him up, no built-in support system, just him and the reality of mining in an unforgiving industry. He hit roadblocks, equipment failures, bad weather, and financial struggles. Every mistake was a lesson, every setback a reminder that making a name for yourself isn't as simple as just walking away. Then came the moment everyone saw coming. He needed help. His equipment wasn't working, and he reached out to the one person he swore he'd break away from: Tony. But Tony wasn't handing out free favors. He believed in tough love, in earning your place, not being given handouts. When the request for assistance came, Tony made it clear. If help was needed, it had to be earned. It wasn't just about machinery, it was about pride, about principle. And just like that, the divide between them grew even wider. The whole thing played out in front of Gold Rush fans, who had plenty to say. Some backed him, arguing that he deserved a shot at forging his own path. Others sided with Tony, believing he should respect the system that built him. One thing was clear: this was more than just a business disagreement. It was a full-blown family battle, and there were no easy answers. Still, Tony wasn't completely heartless. Despite the tension, he eventually stepped in, offering some equipment when it was needed most. Was it a peace offering? A way to keep the family name intact? Who knows? But it proved one thing. Despite all their clashes, Tony still cared about his son's success, even if he had a tough way of showing it. Then came the next move, the one no one saw coming. He teamed up with Parker Schnabel. That's right, Tony's competitor. If leaving the family business wasn't enough, working with Parker felt like a direct challenge to Tony's legacy. Was it a smart business decision? Maybe. Was it personal? It sure looked that way. He wanted to prove himself, and if that meant working with his dad's rival, so be it. Leaving behind a family business is never easy, but when Kevin Beets went his own way, it was only a matter of time before his past caught up with him. A son's fight to build his own name. Meanwhile, back at the Beets operation, things were shifting. Kevin's sister, Monica, started stepping up, taking on more leadership. The absence of Kevin left a hole, but the business wasn't going to stop for anyone. The operation kept moving, adapting, evolving. But make no mistake, Kevin's departure changed everything. At the heart of all this was a fundamental clash between generations. The head of the Beets family represented old-school mining, the belief in hard work, no shortcuts, and sticking to what's proven. Kevin? He wanted something different. New technology, fresh ideas, a different way of running things. It wasn't just about gold. It was about identity, about what it meant to be a Beets in the mining world. Kevin's path away from the family operation wasn't smooth. Without the Beets name behind him, things got real, fast. Mining is expensive, brutal, and unpredictable. Securing equipment, running a crew, dealing with setbacks, it was all on him now. The safety net was gone. Every mistake was his to own, every success his to claim. Kevin's choices had people talking, and they weren't quiet about it. Some respected him for stepping away from his father's business and trying to make a name for himself. They saw it as a bold move, proof that he wasn't afraid to carve his own path, even if it meant struggling. But not everyone saw it that way. Others thought he was being reckless, walking away from a future filled with wealth and success just to make a statement. They couldn't understand why he would turn his back on an empire that had already been built for him. Opinions clashed, debates went on, and people argued over whether he was making the right decision or setting himself up for failure. But at the end of the day, only Kevin had to live with the consequences of his choices, and he seemed ready to face whatever came next. No matter what people thought, Kevin refused to change his mind. He wasn't looking for an easy road, and he definitely wasn't interested in following someone else's plan for his life. He wanted to prove something, to himself, to his family, and to everyone who doubted him. It wasn't about money or success handed down from his father. It was about standing on his own, showing that he wasn't just someone's son, but his own person. Every setback, every struggle, every hard lesson only made him more determined. He didn't see obstacles as reasons to quit. He saw them as proof that he was on the right path. He had no interest in being another chapter in the family legacy. He was writing his own story, even if that meant taking the harder road. But this wasn't just about Kevin. The Beets family had always been complicated, their relationships filled with pride, power, and a deep need to prove themselves. This was about more than a father and son who couldn't see eye to eye. It was about what happens when two strong-willed people refuse to bend. The man at the head of the family had spent years building his empire, pushing through hardships and making a name for himself as one of the toughest gold miners out there. He expected his son to follow in his footsteps, to carry on the family business and protect what had been built. But Kevin wasn't interested in inheriting something. He wanted to create something. That put them on opposite sides of a battle neither of them was willing to lose. Did Kevin Beets truly outsmart Tony and Parker, or did he just get lucky with the right timing? Tell us what you think, and remember to like and subscribe for more.